Hello, this is Ograniani Publishing House with our latest original work, available on the Romanticism channel. Read by Vladislav Serpukov. Enjoy listening to The Manor Kitchen. The Manor Kitchen. Rosemere smelled of fried onions, rosemary, and despair. Neri stood by the massive hearth, stirring the sauce in a copper pot and praying to all the saints not to ruin the dinner on which her family's fate depended. She wore a rough gray apron over a simple brown dress. Her hair was hidden under a white cap, and her hands, the same hands that had played the piano in the drawing room just a week ago, were now smeared with flour and grease. "The fire is too strong, miss," said the old maid Betsy anxiously. Of course, she thought, apart from the butler, Wilkins, who knew the truth, the sauce will burn. Nerissa quickly moved the pot away from the heat and continued stirring. The sauce was indeed beginning to thicken. Was this a good sign or a bad one? She had no idea. It all started a week ago when their cook, Mrs. Hollis, announced that she was leaving. Her sister in York had fallen ill, and Mrs. Hollis was leaving to look after her. Normally, this would not have been a disaster. They could have hired a new cook, but the Rowland family didn't have the money for that. 3 months ago, their father, Viscount Rowland, lost the entire family fortune playing cards. Literally everything. Money and jewels. Even the Rosemere estate now belonged to a ruthless moneylender named Mr. Burr Rose. They had a year to buy back the estate, otherwise they would lose their home and what little dignity they had left. Their only hope lay in the successful marriage of Delphina's older sister. When the Duke of Linchester, one of the richest men in England, unexpectedly showed interest in Delphina after meeting her at the Countess of Pembroke's ball, the whole family clung to this hope like a drowning man clings to a straw. But there was a catch. The Duke was a renowned gourmet and aesthete. He appreciated art, music, and literature. Most importantly now, he appreciated fine cuisine. But they did not have a cook. When the Duke sent a note saying that he wished to visit and dine with the family, there was panic in the house for the next 3 days. It was impossible to hire a decent cook in such a short time. Canceling the visit would be offensive and raise suspicions. Then Nerissa remembered an old French cookbook in her father's library. She spent 3 days and 3 nights studying recipes, taking notes, and practicing secretly in the kitchen at night. On the morning of the Duke's visit, she announced her plan to the family. "I will be the cook." Delphine thought it was madness. Her mother fainted. Her father drank half a bottle of brandy, but there was no choice. Now Nerissa was standing in the kitchen, preparing lunch for the most demanding gourmet in England, and hoping that her theoretical knowledge would suffice. "Miss Nerissa," whispered Betsy, peeking into the hallway. "He'll be here in half an hour. You'll need it, I know." Nerissa wiped her sweaty forehead with the back of her hand. The soup was almost ready. The fish was in the oven and the roast was marinating. "I'll manage." She barely made it. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. Nerissa looked out of the kitchen window and saw Wilkins escorting a tall gentleman wearing a dark green frock coat into the drawing room. She had barely enough time to catch a glimpse of his sharp, almost stern profile before the door closed. The Duke of Lincoln. Nerissa had seen him once before at the Countess of Pembroke's ball, where he had met Delphine. From a distance, he had seemed tall, dark-haired, and haughty. Delphine later admitted that talking to him had been the most stressful experience of her life. He talked about Greek philosophy and rare wines, and she could barely keep up with his train of thought. The first course in 15 minutes, Nerissa reminded herself aloud as she checked the asparagus soup. The last dinner was about to begin. Wilkins and Betsy carried dishes from the kitchen to the dining room and back. Every time the door opened, Nerissa froze in anticipation. "Well, does he like it?" "I can't say." Betsy shook her head as she cleared away the empty soup plates. His face was expressionless and unreadable, but he ate everything, right down to the last drop. That was a good sign. Nerissa moved on to the second course, sea bream stuffed with herbs and lemon in the very sauce she had struggled so much to make. The fish was taken into the dining room and an empty plate was returned. Next came roast lamb with rosemary, vegetables in garlic oil, and pear tart for dessert. Nerissa cooked, served, and waited. Her dress stuck to her back with sweat. Her legs ached and her hands trembled with fatigue and nerves. But she persevered. Then when dessert was served, Wilkins returned with news that made Nerissa's heart sink. His lordship wanted to see the cook in person to thank her for the excellent dinner. Nerissa froze, still holding the dirty pot. He insists, miss. Wilkins lowered his voice. He says the dinner was so exquisite that he must express his gratitude to the cook. Betsy gasped. Nerissa felt the room spin before her eyes. But I can't, she said. What if he recognizes me? He's never seen you up close, miss. Wilkins tried to reassure her. You were in the crowd at that ball. Besides, you don't look like a lady at all in your apron and cap. That was true. Nerissa barely recognized herself in the reflection of the copper pot. Her face was red from the heat. A few strands of hair had escaped from under her cap. There was a smudge of flour on her cheek. What should I say? Thank you, Carrie Varens, Wilkins advised. Say you're the new cook, nothing else. The fewer words, the better. Nerissa took off the dirtiest apron and left the clean one on. She adjusted her cap to make sure it hid most of her hair, wiped her hands and face with a damp towel, and took a deep breath. Just say thank you and leave, she whispered to herself. I can do this. Wilkins led her down the corridor. With every step, her panic grew. What if he recognized her? What if her voice gave her away? What if the dolphin couldn't hold back and ruined everything? The dining room door opened. Nerissa entered, her eyes downcast, and curtsied deeply. Your Grace, said Wilkins, the new cook. Nerissa did not raise her head. All she could see were the edge of the table, the legs of the chairs, and, out of the corner of her eye, the Duke's dark, polished boots. Stand up. The voice was deep, with a slight croak. It sounded interested. Nerissa slowly stood up, but continued to look away, as if out of modesty. That's it. What is your name? Asked the Duke. Pause. She hadn't thought it through. What name should she give? Colette, she replied, Your Highness. After all, a French name seemed appropriate for a cook who prepared French food. Colette, he repeated, and she thought she detected a hint of smirk in his voice. A French name for French cuisine appropriate. Nerissa risked looking up and regretted it. The Duke of Lincoln was sitting at the head of the table, leaning back in his chair and looking straight at her. Up close, he was even more striking than she remembered. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark, slightly tousled hair. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with slightly tousled dark hair, as if he was accustomed to running his hand through it. His face was interesting rather than handsome. He had sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and a nose with a slight bump that suggested it had once been broken. But his eyes, my God, his eyes, dark brown, almost black, intelligent and mocking, and now fixed on her with such intensity that she wanted to hide. Tell me, Colette, he said, tilting his head slightly. Where did you learn to cook? Nerissa felt her throat go dry. I'm here, your lordship. Self-taught, self-taught. He raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Your sauce was very skillful for someone who is self-taught, although it was a little salty. She felt her cheeks flush. Of course it was salty. She had been nervous and added too much. I apologize, your lordship. No need to apologize. He waved his hand. It was just criticism, not a reproach. Tell me, are you French? No, your lordship. Yet you cook French cuisine from books. He was too perceptive. Nerissa nervously fiddled with the edge of her apron. Yes, your lordship. My master has a French cookbook. I studied it. The Duke tapped his fingers on the table as he continued to study her. A curious cook. Self-taught, able to create a decent dinner from theory alone by reading books. At the far end of the table, the dolphin sat with his face red as a beetroot, staring at his plate. Her father cleared his throat nervously. Her mother clutched her napkin. Thank you for the compliment, your grace. Nerissa curtsied again, desperately wanting to escape. If you'll excuse me, I need to return to the kitchen. Wait, she froze. The Duke rose from the table. Despite his height, the movement was smooth and graceful. He came closer, and Nerissa felt an urge to step back, but she stood her ground, chin raised. He stopped a step away from her, so close that she could smell his cologne. It was something with sandalwood and orange. Raise your head, he said quietly. Nerissa obeyed, meeting his gaze. His eyes studied her face slowly and intently, as if he were trying to solve a puzzle. You have unusual eyes, he remarked. They were green, almost emerald, in hands. He took her hand before she could pull it away, turning her palm upwards. Fresh calluses. You've started working in the kitchen recently. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Nerissa pulled her hand away. Yes, your lordship. Mrs. Hollis, our former cook, left a week ago. I replaced her. A week ago, he repeated. And in that time, you have learned to cook so well that even I, someone who has eaten at half the restaurants in Paris, enjoyed my dinner. Either you're a genius or... He didn't finish his sentence, but continued to look at her with the same mocking curiosity. Either that or your lordship couldn't hold your rice. The corners of his lips twitched. Or you're not quite what you seem. Silence hung in the air. Nurse's heart was beating so loudly that she felt the whole house could hear it. I'm just a cook, she said firmly. Of course, he took a step back and the tension eased a little. Just a cook. I apologize for my tactlessness. He turned to the Rowland family. Lord Rowland, Lady Rowland, Miss Delphine. He bowed. Thank you for your hospitality and for a truly delightful dinner. I have rarely enjoyed a meal in a private home so much. Father stood up hastily. You are too kind, Your Grace. We are very flattered. The Duke looked at Nears again. I am delighted with your cook. She is very talented. There was something in his tone that made Nears wary, however. She simply curtsied again, however, and hurried out of the room before he could ask any more questions. In the kitchen, she leaned against the wall and closed her eyes, trying to stop her hands from shaking. He suspected. She could see it in his eyes. He knew something was wrong with her. But what exactly did he think? Was she a lady in disguise, or just an unusual servant? Betsy ran into the kitchen. Her eyes were shining. Miss Nerissa, did you hear that? He said the dinner was delicious. It's a success. Oh yes, Nerissa muttered absently. A success. But why did she feel as if she had just played a very dangerous game? And why could she not stop thinking about the Duke's dark eyes studying her face? Wilkins escorted the Duke to the door. In the hall, the Duke put on his gloves and picked up his cane. Then he turned to the butler. Tell me, Wilkins, he said casually. Your new cook, where is she from? Wilkins hesitated for a moment. From the village, Your Grace. She's a local girl. I'm not sure of her family name. Your Grace. She was recommended. I see. The Duke put on his top hat. Tell her that if she ever wishes to change job ops, I would be happy to take her on. A cook with such skills is a rarity. I will pass that on, Your Grace. The Duke walked out to his carriage. The coachman opened the door, but before he got in, the Duke took one last look at his heel. A figure flashed in one of the windows, a girl in a bonnet and an apron who immediately recoiled when she noticed him looking. The Duke smiled. Coulette, he muttered under his breath. What an interesting mystery you hide. He got into the carriage and told the coachman to drive on. However, his thoughts remained in that house, in that kitchen, with that girl with emerald eyes and fresh calluses on hands that were too delicate for a cook's. Something was wrong with Rowland House. Despair hung in the air, despite attempts to hide it. The worn upholstery on the chairs, the lack of silver on the table. The Viscount's daughter was pale and nervous, clearly aware that her future depended on this dinner. And then there was this cook, this impossible, mysterious cook. Duke Talbot Jameson would not have lived to be 32 and remained one of the most influential men in England without his ability to read people. He saw many contradictions in the girl, hands that held a ladle, yet were too delicate for constant kitchen work. Her speech was too proper and educated for a simple servant. She held her head high despite her humble position. And those eyes, intelligent, bright, and full of hidden fire. No, Colette was not just a cook, he was sure of that. The question was who she really was, and why she was hiding behind the mask of a maid. Talbot leaned back in his carriage seat and smiled. He was bored with the season and its predictable balls, not to mention its even more predictable debutantes. Miss Delphine Rowland was sweet but boring. Talking to her was like walking through an empty gallery. This girl in the kitchen, however, was a mystery and a challenge, and the Duke of Linchester could never resist a good mystery. In the bedroom on the second floor of Romer Manor, Nerissa finally removed her cap and apron, let her hair down, and sank onto the bed. Delphine burst into the room without knocking. Neri, you were incredible. He said the dinner was delightful, delightful. But I heard her. Nerissa smiled wearily. That means it worked. Our plan worked. Delphina spun around the room. He's bound to propose to me now, she said. I know it. Nerissa wanted to share her sister's enthusiasm and believe that everything would end well. However, the Duke's attentive, suspicious, and perceptive gaze came to mind. Delphina, she called. What do you think of the Duke? Delphina stopped. He's impressive, very intelligent, and very rich. Iano, do you love him? Delphina turned away towards the window. Love is a luxury we cannot afford, Neri. If I don't marry him, we'll lose everything. I know, whispered Nerissa. But when her sister left, she remained sitting on the bed, thinking about the Duke of Glenchester, his mocking smile, how he had taken her hand and examined the calluses, his words, "You are not quite what you seem." He was dangerous, too clever and too observant. Worst of all, when he stood so close and looked straight into her eyes, Nerissa felt a strange thrill, an excitement she shouldn't feel for her sister's fiancé. It doesn't mean anything, she said to the empty room. Just nonsense after lunch. But that night, when she went to bed, she dreamed of dark eyes and a voice saying, "You are not quite what you seem." Meanwhile, somewhere in London, in a luxurious mansion on Berkeley Square, the Duke of Lincoln sat in his library with a glass of whiskey, smiling as he thought of the mysterious cook with emerald eyes. The game had only just begun, and both of them, without realizing it, were already caught up in it. The next morning was gray and rainy. Nerissa woke up with a heavy head and aching muscles. Yesterday's hours spent standing at the stove had taken their toll. She lay in bed, listening to the rain drumming on the windows and trying to convince herself that the worst was over. Lunch had gone well. The Duke was pleased. Now all she had to do was wait for him to propose to the Delphin, and everything would be fine. Yet for some reason she couldn't relax. She remembered the Duke's attentive, searching gaze, which was too perceptive. The way he had taken her hand and examined her calluses. His words about her not being quite who she seemed. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Neri the Dauphine burst into the room waving a letter. Her cheeks were flushed and her eyes were shining. A letter from him. Nerissa sat up in bed. From the Duke? Yes. Delphina sat down next to her sister on the bed. Wilkin had just brought it. It's addressed to Father, but there's an invitation for the whole family. Where? Delphina unfolded the letter and began to read aloud. Lord Rowland, thank you for yesterday's reception. The dinner was a real pleasure, and I would be delighted to return the favor. Please allow me to invite you, Lady Rowland and your daughter, to dinner at my London home on Saturday at 7:00 p.m. Please also convey my admiration to your new cook. Her talent is worthy of recognition. If it does not seem too strange, I would be grateful if she could accompany you. I would like to show her my kitchen and discuss some of the finer points of French cuisine. I believe that the exchange of ideas would benefit us both. Yours sincerely, Talbot Jameson. Duke of Lincoln. Nerissa listened with growing horror. By the end of the letter, her face must have been whiter than the paper. He wants the cook to come with you, she gasped. Isn't that wonderful? Delphine beamed. He's so impressed with your cooking. This invitation for the whole family is almost an official courtship. Father says it's a sure sign that the Duke is serious. Delphi, Neria grabbed her sister's hands. I can't go. If I turn up at his house, where there will be lots of servants, someone is bound to realize that I'm not actually a cook. Or will he? He's too perceptive. He suspected something yesterday. Delphina frowned. But if you don't come, he'll be offended. He specifically asked for you. She squeezed her sister's hand. Neri, please. This may be our last chance. Neri closed her eyes. The trap was closing. She had driven herself into it by agreeing to this crazy plan. All right, she said finally. I'll go, but this is absolute madness. Neri spent the next 2 days in a state of near panic. She studied the French cookbook again, trying to memorize terms and dish names in case the Duke asked her any questions. She practiced the gait and mannerisms of a simple maid in front of the mirror. She adopted a more stooped posture, keeping her eyes downcast and her hands folded on her apron. At the same time, she was in seventh heaven, spending hours choosing dresses for dinner and trying out different hairstyles and light conversation topics. Do you think I should mention that I play the harp? She asked Nerissa. Or would that sound like I'm trying too hard? Go ahead and mention it, Nirsa replied absently, buried in her book. Men love musical women. What about poetry? I've memorized a few Byron verses. The Duke appreciates poetry. He does. Neri, are you even listening to me? Neri looked up from her book. Sorry, Delphi, I'm just nervous. Delphina sat down next to her sister. Everything will be fine. You'll manage. You always do. However, when the Rowland family carriage pulled up at the Duke's London mansion on Grosvenor Square on Saturday evening, Neri's confidence did not increase. The house was impressive. It was a four-story building made of light stone with columns at the entrance and dozens of windows shining in the evening twilight. Footmen in livery were standing on either side of the door. Everything spoke of wealth, power, and impeccable taste. As was proper for a maid, Nerissa rode separately from the family on the box seat next to the coachman. She wore the same brown dress and gray apron as last time. Her hair was hidden under a bonnet. When the carriage stopped, she jumped down and headed for the service entrance at the back of the house as Wilkins had instructed. The door was opened by the butler, a tall, thin man with a stern face. You must be the new cook from Rowland's house. Yes, sir. Nerissa lowered her gaze. My name is Mr. Graves. Follow me. He led her down a narrow corridor to the kitchen. Nerissa could barely take in the house. There were marble floors, silk-covered walls, and portraits in gilded frames. Everything was 10 times more luxurious than at Rosemeyer. The kitchen was enormous. In fact, it was half the size of the ground floor of their estate. It contained a massive stove with 6 burners, 2 hearths, long wooden tables, and copper pots and pans hanging from the walls. The air was filled with the scents of rosemary, roasted meat, and fresh bread. A man wearing a white apron and a tall chef's hat was standing at the stove. He was short and plump, with a ruddy face and a bushy mustache. Masia Renk Bakulasa, announced Mr. Graves. A girl from the house of Rowland. The chef turned and looked Nirsa up and down critically. So you are the very same Quale that his lordship spoke of, he said in a strong French accent. A little English girl who thinks she can cook French cuisine. Nirsa felt a pang of irritation but restrained herself. I am learning, monsieur. Learning, he snorted. French cuisine is not something you learn from books. It's an art. It's in the blood. Then perhaps you can teach me something, he said. Nerissa lifted her chin. His lordship has offered to share his experience. Monsieur Laurent stared at her, then suddenly laughed heartily, saying, Oh, the little mouse has claws. He clapped his hands. I like that. Maybe you're not hopeless after all. Come here and watch a real chef at work. Nera spent the next hour watching the chef. He was preparing dinner for the Duke and his guests. There was duck and cherry sauce, chestnut soup, and vegetables in oil with herbs. His hands moved with the confidence of an artist as he cut, stirred, and seasoned. He commented on every action, sometimes switching to French when he became excited. You see, he said, the sauce should be smooth as silk, not like the lumps you English call gravy. The herbs must always be fresh, too. Dried herbs are an insult to the kitchen. Nerissa listened, absorbing every word. Despite his arrogance, Monsieur Laurent was truly a master. Now you. He handed her a knife and an onion. Show me how you cut. Nerissa took the knife. Her technique was far from perfect. She had taught herself through trial and error. She began cutting the onion into uneven slices. Monsieur Laurent groaned and clutched his head. My God, this is a disaster. He took her hands in his and showed her the correct position for her fingers and the correct angle for the knife. See? Evenly, quickly, gracefully. At that moment, the kitchen door opened and the Duke of Linchester entered. Nerissa froze, still holding the knife. Monsieur Laurent straightened up and wiped his hands on his apron. Your Grace, he said, we weren't expecting you in the kitchen. I wanted to check how the lesson was going. The Duke glanced around the kitchen, then stopped at Nerissa. A slight smile played on his lips. Miss Callett, I am glad to see that you accepted my invitation. Nerissa quickly lowered the knife and curtsied. Your Grace. He came closer and she could feel that strange tension in the air again. He was dressed less formally than last time. He wore a dark blue frock coat with his tie loosened. His hair was slightly tousled, as if he had run his hand through it. "How do you like my kitchen?" he asked. "Impressive, Your Grace," Nerissa replied honestly. "I've never seen anything like it. Monsieur Laurent is one of the best chefs I managed to lure away from Paris." The Duke looked at the chef. "He has already trained 3 of my cooks. I believe he will be able to pass on some of his knowledge to you too, if you are willing to learn," grumbled Monsieur. "So far, her cutting technique is a crime against cooking." The Duke laughed. "Monsieur Laurent is a perfectionist. Don't take it to heart." He walked around the table and stopped so close to Nerissa that she could smell his cologne mingling with the faint scent of tobacco. "Tell me, Colette," he said quietly, so that only she could hear. "You still claim that you learned to cook in a week?" Nerissa swallowed. "I learned very quickly, Your Lordship." His eyes must have been studying her face because he paused and said, "Either you're a genius or you're lying to me." Nerissa's heart skipped a beat. "I'm not lying, Your Lordship." "No," he said, raising an eyebrow. "Then where did you get hands that are clearly not used to hard work? And why does your intonation sound more like that of an educated lady than a country servant when you speak?" Nerissa felt her cheeks flush. "Your Lordship is mistaken." "I am rarely mistaken." He leaned even closer, his voice almost a whisper. "But I can also be patient. If you don't want to tell me the truth now, I'll wait. Sooner or later, all secrets will come out." He straightened up and took a step back. "Monsieur Laurent, please continue with the lesson. I expect Colette to learn a great deal today." "Of course, Your Grace." The Duke headed for the door, but turned back at the threshold. "Oh yes, Colette," he said. "After dinner, I will ask you to serve dessert in the dining room. I want my guests to meet the talented cook who has so impressed me." He left before Nerissa had a chance to object. Monsieur Laurent looked at her curiously. "Well, his lordship seems very interested in you, mademoiselle." "That's unusual. He just appreciates good cooking," Nerissa muttered, but her hands trembled as she picked up the knife again. Dinner upstairs was due to start at 7 o'clock. Nerissa remained in the kitchen, helping Monsieur with the final preparations, trying not to think about what was happening in the dining room. Delphine was there with the Duke, perhaps charming him with her beauty and grace. Perhaps today was the day he would propose. This thought should have made Nerissa happy, but instead she felt a strange heaviness in her chest. "It's time to serve dessert," announced Monsieur Laurent. "Take the tray." Nerissa took the silver tray bearing portions of chocolate cake exquisitely decorated with berries and whipped cream. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Don't be afraid," Monsieur Laurent patted her on the shoulder. "You're just serving food. What could go wrong?" "A lot," Nerissa thought, but she didn't say it out loud. She climbed the stairs and walked down the hallway to the dining room. A footman stood at the door, opening it to let her in. The dining room was luxurious. There was a long mahogany table, a crystal chandelier, and paintings on the walls. 8 people were seated around the table. The Duke at the head, her parents, the Dauphin, and 4 other guests whom Nerissa did not recognize. Keeping her eyes downcast, she entered and began to place dessert plates in front of each guest. Her hands moved automatically. First the ladies, then the gentlemen, as Wilkins had taught her. The voices at the table continued their conversation. "A most delightful sauce, Your Grace. Your chef is a true master." "Thank you, Lady Fitzgerald. Monsieur Laurent is indeed talented." As Nerissa approached the Dauphine, she stole a quick glance at her sister. The Dauphine looked beautiful in her pink dress and pearl necklace, but her face was tense. She had barely touched her food. Then it was the Duke's turn. Nerissa placed the plate in front of him, trying not to meet his gaze. "Thank you," he said aloud. Then more quietly, so that only she could hear, he added, "Stay after dinner. I want to talk to you." Nerissa nodded slightly and hurried to finish serving. As she headed for the exit, one of the guests, an elderly gentleman with gray sideburns, called out to her, "Wait, young lady, you cooked tonight's dinner." Nerissa turned around and curtsied. "No, sir, Monsieur Laurent did. I only learnt from him." "But you are the cook mentioned by the Duke of Roland." "Yes, sir." The gentleman looked at her with interest. "How curious. His lordship rarely praises anyone's cooking so enthusiastically. You must be truly talented." "You are too kind, sir." "Sir Alfred is prone to exaggeration," the Duke interjected with a smile. "But in this case, he is right. The dinner at Rowland House was exceptional. His gaze met Nisa's, and once again she saw that mixture of mockery and curiosity in his eyes. "You may go, Colette," he said, "and don't forget to stay after dinner." An hour later, the guests began to leave. Nisa waited in a small room next to the library, as the butler had instructed. Her heart was pounding. What did he want to tell her? Was he going to expose her? The door opened. The Duke entered. He took off his coat and unbuttoned the top button of his shirt. He looked tired but satisfied. "Thank you for waiting," he said. He sat down in an armchair by the fireplace and gestured for her to sit opposite him. Nerissa hesitated. "Your Grace, that would be inappropriate. If you are concerned about propriety, we can leave the door open." He smiled. "But I think it would be better to have our conversation in private." Nerissa slowly lowered herself onto the edge of the chair and clasped her hands on her knees. The Duke poured himself a brandy from the decanter on the side table. "Would you like some?" "I don't drink, Your Grace." "Of course you don't." The smirk in his voice was obvious. Well-bred young ladies didn't drink brandy, after all. Nerissa pressed her lips together without answering. The Duke took a sip, leaned back in his chair and looked at her with a long, searching gaze. "So, Colette, if that is indeed your name, allow me to be frank," he began. "I know you are not a cook." Nerissa felt panic rising within her, but she kept her face impassive. "Your Grace is mistaken." "Well, as I said, I am rarely mistaken." He leaned forward. "Your hands, your posture, your mannerisms give you away. You are an educated girl pretending to be a servant. The question is, why?" Nerissa remained silent, desperately trying to think of a reply. "Let me put forward a theory," the Duke continued. "The Rowland family is in desperate financial straits. This is obvious to any observant person. They have worn-out furniture, no servants, and tense faces. When their cook quit, there was no money to hire a new one. Then someone, perhaps you, decided to take matters into their own hands. They learned to cook from books and pretended to be the new cook to impress me. You were too close to the truth." Nerissa felt her defenses crumbling. "But here's what I don't understand." The Duke twirled the glass in his hand. "Why would anyone in the Rowland family pretend to be a cook? Unless, of course, that person didn't want me to marry their daughter and was willing to do anything to prevent it." Nerissa jumped up from her chair. "I have to go. Sit down." His voice was soft but commanding. She did not sit down. The Duke rose and approached her. They were standing so close together that Nerissa could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "I am not going to expose you," he said quietly. "On the contrary, I admire your ingenuity, but I want to know the truth." "Who are you?" Nerissa looked him in the eye and made her decision. The lie was becoming too complicated. "I am not Risa," she whispered. "I am the younger daughter of Viscount Rowland, Delphine's sister." The Duke's eyebrows shot up. "Sister," he took a step back and studied her with new interest. "I didn't know Miss Delphina had a sister. She wasn't introduced to society. There was no money." "I see." He nodded slowly. "So you decided to become a cook to help your sister find a wealthy husband. How noble, or how desperate." The words hurt, even though they were true. "My family is on the verge of ruin." Nerissa lifted her chin. "We'll lose our home in a few months if we can't find a way to pay our debts. Delphina's marriage to you is our only chance," she continued, "and so you were willing to pretend to be a servant, work in the kitchen, and risk being exposed." "Yes." There was a long pause. The Duke looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You love your sister more than anything else in the world," he said finally, "and you are willing to sacrifice your reputation and your dignity for her happiness if necessary." He shook his head and a strange smile appeared on his lips. "You are an amazing woman, Nerissa Rond, absolutely amazing." She didn't know how to respond to that. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Tell everyone?" He returned to his chair and sat down. "Your secret is safe, but I have a condition." "What is it?" "You must continue to come for Laron's lessons twice a week." Nerissa stared at him. "Why? Because you intrigue me." He smiled. "And because I want to get to know the real you, not the one hiding under a bonnet and apron. But you are courting the dolphin. I've had dinner with your family twice and invited you to dinner. He corrected himself. That's not exactly courting. Nerissa's heart sank. You're not going to propose to her? He looked at her for a long time. Miss Dolphin is beautiful, well-mannered and sweet. She'll make a good wife for someone, but not for me. Why? Because when I talk to her, I feel bored. But when I talk to you, even when you pretend to be a cook and lie to my face, I feel more alive than I have in years. Nerissa couldn't breathe. You can't. It's impossible. Why is it impossible? Because my family is counting on this marriage. Because we'll lose everything. You are a duke, and I am just a girl who learnt French cuisine from books to save my family. He stood up and approached her again. She was a girl with emerald eyes and the courage of a lion. A girl who was not afraid to deceive the duke for the sake of her loved ones. His hand rose and touched her cheek with a lightness that sent shivers down her skin. So, Miss Nerissa Rond, you will agree to my terms. You will come twice a week and continue to play the role of courtesan for us. But you will also allow me to get to know the real you. She should have refused. She should have thought about her family, her duty, and the dolphin. But when she looked into his dark, challenging, promising eyes, all reasonable arguments melted away. Yes, she whispered. I agree. His smile was slow and triumphant. Excellent. Then I'll see you on Monday, Miss Khaled. He kissed her hand. It was an informal kiss, but a long one. His lips lingered on her skin for longer than was proper. When Nerissa left the house and got into the carriage where her parents and Delphine were waiting, her heart was still pounding. Delphine took her by the hand. The Duke detained you. What did he talk about? Cooking, Nerissa lied. He wanted to discuss some recipes. It was a lie, but the smallest of all the lies she had told that day, because the truth was too frightening to say aloud. The Duke of Linchester was not interested in Delphina. He was interested in her. And to her horror and delight, Nerissa realized that she was interested in him too. The game she had started out of desperation was turning into something completely different, something dangerous. And she had no idea how to extricate herself from it. Monday was clear and cold. Nerissa stood in front of the mirror in her room, pulling on a brown dress and apron. She tried to convince herself that this was just a regular cooking lesson. Nothing more. The Duke just wanted to entertain himself by watching her clumsy attempts at cooking. That was all, but her hands trembled as she pinned her hair under the chef's hat. Neri, are you sure this is a good idea? Delphine sat on the bed, watching her sister get ready. Her face was pale. There were dark circles under her eyes. She hadn't slept well in the last few days. The Duke himself had suggested it. Nerissa avoided looking at her sister. Monsieur Larin is one of the best chefs in Europe. It's a valuable learning opportunity. But why do you need it? Delphina's voice sounded confused. When I marry the Duke, we'll have chefs. You won't have to pretend to be a cook anymore. Nerissa froze, her hand still on the cap. Delphi, he's going to propose to me, isn't he? Her sister's voice was filled with tears. On Saturday, he was polite but cold. He hardly spoke to me at dinner. He was distracted the whole time and kept looking at the door as if he was waiting for someone. Guilt tightened Nerissa's throat. She knew who the Duke was waiting for. He was waiting for her to come in with the dessert. Maybe he just needs time, Nera said weakly. Men don't like to rush into such decisions. Or had he already decided to refuse? Delphina wiped away a tear. Maybe I'm not good enough for him. Maybe I'm not smart or interesting enough. Don't be silly, Nerissa said. Nerissa turned to her sister and sat down next to her on the bed. You are beautiful, kind and talented. Any man would be lucky to have you as his wife, but not the Duke of Linchester. Nerissa couldn't think of a reply because, deep down, she knew her sister was right. The Duke's London mansion greeted her with gray stone and tall windows. She walked to the service entrance where Mr. Graves was waiting for her. Monsieur Laurent is in the kitchen, the butler informed her. His lordship said he would join her later. The kitchen was in its usual state of chaos, with preparations for dinner underway. Monsieur Laurent was directing two assistants who were cleaning vegetables and washing dishes. When he saw Nerissa, he clapped his hands. Mademoiselle Calais, you are 3 minutes late. In France, chefs are fired for this. I apologize, monsieur. Nerissa quickly put on a clean apron. It's okay. It's okay, he said, waving his hand. Today, we're going to learn how to make the perfect bechamel sauce. It's the foundation of French cuisine. Watch carefully. Nerissa spent the next hour watching Monsieur Laurent melt butter, add flour, and pour in milk. His hands moved with familiar confidence, and he commented on every step of the process. You see, he said, the flour must absorb all the butter, but not burn. It should be golden, not brown. We must add the milk gradually, stirring constantly. Otherwise, there will be lumps, and that would be disastrous. Nerissa nodded, trying to remember every detail. Now you, he said, handing her a spoon, show me what you've learned. Nerissa took the spoon and began stirring the sauce. It was smooth and creamy, and it smelled of nuts and milk. Good, Monsieur Laurent approved. Very good. You have a light touch, which is important. At that moment, the Duke came down to the kitchen. He was dressed in his work clothes. He wore a simple white shirt and a waistcoat with the sleeves rolled up to the elbows, and his hair was slightly tousled. He looked younger and more approachable than he did in his formal suit. Monsieur Laurent, how is the lesson going? Mademoiselle is a quick learner, Your Grace. She has talent. I had no doubt. The Duke came closer and looked into the pot. Bechamel, he said, a classic, the foundation on which everything else is built. Monsieur Laurent said importantly. The Duke took a clean spoon, scooped up some sauce, and tasted it. His eyes met Nursey's. Excellent, he said, smooth and silky, the right consistency. He licked his lips, and Nursey felt a strange flutter in her stomach. Although, she thought, I would add a pinch of nutmeg. It adds depth to the flavor. Nutmeg. Monsieur clapped his hands. Exactly, Your Grace is absolutely right. Mademoiselle, make a note of that. Add nutmeg to the bechamel sauce. Nerissa nodded, trying not to look at the Duke, who was standing too close for comfort, filling the entire kitchen with his presence. Monsieur Laurent, the Duke said, I need to discuss the menu for next week's reception. Do you mind if I borrow her for half an hour? Monsieur raised an eyebrow but nodded. Of course, Your Grace. I was just about to start cooking the fish. Mademoiselle can come back later. The Duke gestured for Nerissa to follow him. They climbed the stairs and walked through the corridor, finding themselves in a small living room on the second floor. The room was cozy. There was a fireplace, 2 armchairs and bookshelves along the walls, as well as a large window overlooking the garden. When the door closed behind them, Nerissa turned to the Duke. What's on the menu, Your Grace? You made this up. He smiled broadly. But Monsieur Laurent is too jealous of his kitchen. If I had just taken you away, he would have been offended. Why did you take me away? He sat down in one of the armchairs and gestured for her to sit opposite him. No witnesses, no pretense, just the 2 of us. Nerissa slowly sank into the armchair and clasped her hands on her knees. What do you want to talk about? You. He leaned back and studied her. The real you, not the harky girl, not the quiet sister, Miss Delphine, but Nerissa. She felt her heart beat faster. You already know everything you need to know about me. I am the youngest daughter of a ruined viscount. There was no money for my season or my entourage. I am nobody. Nobody, he repeated. His voice took on a steely tone. I am a woman who learnt French cuisine in a week to save her family. I pretend to be a servant and risk my reputation. I am ready to do anything for those I love. She is not nobody. She is Rissa. It's more than I've seen in most titled ladies. Nerissa felt her cheeks flush. You shouldn't say such things to me. Why? Because you're my sister, and you're a charming girl who will be very happy with someone else. He leaned forward. But not with me. I think you understand that. My family is counting on this marriage. Then they will have to find another solution. Nerissa jumped up from her chair. You don't understand. We don't have another solution. We only have a few months before we lose our home. Our debts are growing every day. Delphina is our only chance. She's beautiful and well-bred, and although her dowry is modest, it still exists, and She fell silent, feeling tears welling up in her throat. The Duke stood up and walked over to her. And what about you? I have nothing, she whispered. No dowry, no prospects. I'm a burden to my family. At least Delphine can get married and save us. But I can only cook and act. His warm, firm hands rested on her shoulders. Nerissa, look at me. She looked up. His face was serious. There was something in his dark eyes that took her breath away. You are not a burden. You are the most interesting and lively woman I have met in years. When I talk to you, I am never bored. I don't think about business letters or parliamentary sessions. I'm just here with you. You don't have to tell the truth. His hand slid from her shoulders to hers. Wait, because it's inconvenient. Because it ruins your plans to save your family by using your sister. Yes, but what about what you want? This question took her by surprise. I want my family to be safe. Is that what you want, or what you feel is your duty? Nerissa turned away, breaking free from his grip. In our position, desire and duty are one and the same. There is. He turned her back towards him. There always is. And someday you'll have to choose. They were standing so close that she could feel the warmth of his body, see his chest moving as he breathed, and smell the faint scent of sandalwood mingled with something else that was masculine, warm, and inviting. I've already chosen, she whispered. I chose family. Are you sure? Before she could answer, he leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't a casual kiss on the hand or a light touch of the lips. It was a real kiss, deep, demanding, and dizzying. His lips were firm and confident. When she gasped in surprise, he deepened the kiss. His tongue touched her lips. Nerissa should have pushed him away, remembered the dolphin, her family and her duty, but her body betrayed her. Her hands rose to his shoulders, and her fingers clung to the fabric of his shirt as she kissed him back. The world narrowed down to this moment, the taste of his lips, the warmth of his hands on her waist, the frantic beating of her heart. All that she had tried to deny these past days, all that she had hidden even from herself, burst forth. She wanted him. God, how she wanted him. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing heavily. The Duke pressed his forehead against hers. His arms were still around her waist. Still sure you've chosen your family? He whispered. Nerissa closed her eyes, feeling tears run down her cheeks. This is wrong. What we're doing is wrong. Why? Because society says so. Because you're the younger daughter, not the older one. Because Delphine loves you. He pulled away and looked into her eyes. Your sister loves the idea of me, the title, the wealth, the security I can offer. But she doesn't love me as a person. I don't love her either. But you could in time. No, he shook his head. I couldn't, he said. When I'm with her, I think of you. When she speaks, I hear your voice. When she laughs, I remember how you laughed at the absurdity of the situation with the cook. Nerissa took a step back, pressing her hand to her lips. I can't betray the dolphin like that. Then what do you suggest? There was bitterness in his voice. That I marry a woman I don't love to save your family, and you'll spend the rest of your life knowing we could have been together, but you refused because of a sense of duty? Yes, she whispered. That's exactly what I'm suggesting. There was a long silence. The Duke turned away and paced the room, running his hand through his hair. You're cruel, Nerissa Rowland. I'm realistic. He turned back and there was a mixture of pain and anger in his eyes. No, you're a coward. You hide behind duty and family because you're afraid to take risks. You're afraid to be happy in case it causes someone else to suffer. The words hurt like a slap. Nerissa felt something break inside her. You don't understand. I understand more than you think. He walked to the door and opened it. Go back to the kitchen. Monsieur Laurent is waiting for you. Continue to play your role as the obedient daughter who sacrifices everything for others. Let's see how long it takes before you realize that you are not sacrificing for them, but because of your own fear. He left, leaving her alone in the room. Nerissa sank back into the chair and covered her face with her hands. Tears streamed through her fingers. He was right. God, he was right. She was a coward, too afraid to take risks or to go after what she wanted for fear of hurting Delphine. But was that wrong? Was it cowardly to care about her sister's feelings? She didn't know. All she knew was that her heart was breaking. For the first time in her life, she wanted to be selfish. She wanted to take what she wanted without considering the consequences. But she couldn't. When Nerissa returned to the kitchen, Monsieur Laurent took one look at her face and asked no questions. He just silently gave her some carrots to peel. The monotonous work allowed her to stop thinking. The rest of the day passed in a blur. She mechanically followed instructions, ate her meal early, chopped, stirred, and tasted. But her thoughts were far away. The Duke did not appear in the kitchen again. When it was time to leave, Mr. Graves escorted her to the door. Mademoiselle Coilet, he called after her as she was about to leave. His lordship asked me to give this to you. He held out a small envelope. Nerissa took it with trembling fingers, hid it in her pocket, and quickly went out into the street. It was only on the way back to Rosemere that she decided to open the letter. Inside was a short note in firm handwriting. Nerissa, I apologize for what I said today. I had no right to call you a coward. Your devotion to your family is admirable, not condemnable. However, I cannot deny my feelings. I cannot court your sister when I know that I want someone else. Therefore, I have made a decision. Tomorrow, I will send your father a formal letter apologizing, but explaining that I cannot continue courting your sister. I won't mention you. I will simply say that I have realized that your sister and I are not suited to each other. This will cause your family pain, and I am sorry. However, to continue deceiving everyone would be worse. You are still welcome to come to the lessons if you wish. Monsieur Laurent sincerely believes that you are talented. I promise to keep my distance. Ted. Nerissa reread the letter 3 times, feeling panic rising in waves. He was going to give up on Delphine. Tomorrow their last chance would be ruined, and all because of her. Disaster awaited her at home. Her father was sitting in the library with a bottle of whiskey. Her mother was crying in the living room, and Delphine stood by the window in her room, looking out at the darkening garden. When Nerissa entered, Delphina didn't even turn around. A letter has arrived, said the Delphina quietly. From the Duke. He is refusing to court me. Nerissa's heart stopped. But he said tomorrow, Delphina said, turning abruptly. Her eyes were red from crying, but there was something else in her gaze. Suspicion. Did you know? Nerissa opened her mouth, but she couldn't find the words. Did you know? Delphina repeated. This time it wasn't a question. She stepped closer to her sister. How long? When did he tell you, Delphi? I can explain. How do you explain that the Duke, who was supposed to save our family and marry me, fell in love with you instead? The words hung in the air. Nerissa felt the blood drain from her face. Don't lie to me. Delphina's voice trembled. I saw the way he looked at you on Saturday when you served dessert. I saw how you blushed when he spoke to you. I'm not stupid, Neri. I just didn't want to believe that my own sister could betray me like that. I didn't want to. Tears streamed down Nerissa's cheeks. I swear, Delphina, I didn't want to. I tried to stop it. I tried to push him away, but not hard enough. Delphina turned back to the window. Her shoulders shook with stifled sobs. Now we'll lose everything, our home, our reputation, our future, and it's all because of you. You stole my fiancé. He wasn't your fiancé. He never proposed to you, but he should have done. Delphina turned around. Her face was contorted with grief and anger. If it weren't for you, if you had just stayed where you were, not come into the kitchen, not pretended to be someone special. The words cut like knives. Nerissa took a step back. I did it for you, for all of us. And look what it led to. Delphina wrapped her arms around herself. Neri, go away. I don't want to see you right now. Go away, Delph. Nerissa left the room, closed the door behind her, and leaned against it, feeling her world crumble. She had lost her family's only chance of salvation. She had broken her sister's heart. And for what? For a man with whom she had no future. For a few stolen moments. One kiss, promises that would never be kept. She went down to her room, lay on her bed and cried. She cried from grief, guilt, and the impossibility of the situation. Meanwhile, in a London mansion, the Duke of Lincoln stood by the window in his library, looking out at the nighttime city and drinking whiskey in an attempt to numb the pain in his chest. He made the right choice, he told himself. He couldn't marry one woman while loving another. He couldn't deceive Delphine by giving her false hope. But why did he feel as if he had just made a terrible mistake? Because by rejecting Delphine, he hadn't gained nerves. She had made that perfectly clear. Her duty and her family were more important than what could have been between them. He had lost them both and was left alone with an empty house and an even emptier heart. A week passed. Nerissa did not leave her room, refused to eat, and did not answer the knocks on the door. Delphina did not speak to her. Her father drank, her mother prayed, and letters from creditors continued to arrive. Each one was more threatening than the last. The end was approaching, and no one knew how to stop it. On the eighth day, Nerissa woke up to persistent knocking at the door. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling and had no intention of answering it, but the knocking did not stop. "Neri," her mother's voice was firm. "Open the door immediately." Nerissa got up, threw on a shawl, and unlocked the door. Her mother entered, followed by a maid carrying a tray with steaming tea and toast. "Sit down." Lady Roland pointed to the armchair by the window. "Eat and listen." Nerissa sat down silently. Her mother sat opposite her hands folded in her lap. Despite her worn morning dress and the fatigue visible on her face, she still carried herself with the dignity of a lady. "Your father received a letter last night," her mother began, "from the Duke of Linchester." Nerissa's heart sank. "He is offering help." Her mother took the letter out of her pocket and handed it to her daughter. "Read it yourself," she said. With trembling fingers, Nerissa unfolded the paper. "Lord Roland, please accept my deepest apologies for failing to live up to your family's expectations regarding Miss Delphine. She is a beautiful young lady who deserves a better husband than I could ever be. However, I cannot remain indifferent to the difficulties your family is facing. Please allow me to offer my assistance in resolving the financial issue. I have an acquaintance in the city, Mr. Jonathan Weatherby, a banker with an impeccable reputation. He specializes in restructuring debt for noble families. I have already discussed your situation with him in general terms and without compromising any details, and he is willing to meet with you to discuss possible solutions. In addition, my estate in Hampshire requires a manager. The role includes accommodation in the main house, a competitive salary, and a certain degree of autonomy. If you are interested, I would be happy to offer you the position. This would enable your family to maintain its dignity while the debt issue is resolved, providing a stable income. I ask for nothing in return. Please consider this a gesture of goodwill to a family that has shown me hospitality. Yours sincerely, Talbot Jameson, Duke of Lincoln." Nerissa reread the letter twice, unable to believe her eyes. He was offering her father a job and help with his debts. Her mother nodded. "Your father already met with Mr. Weatherby yesterday. The banker believes he can negotiate a more reasonable repayment plan with the creditors. What about the salary of the manager of the Duke's estate?" She paused. "That's more than we earned from renting out our land before we lost everything." "Why is he doing this?" Nerissa whispered. Her mother looked at her daughter with a long, appraising gaze. "I think you know why." Nerissa turned away from her mother and looked out of the window, feeling tears welling up in her throat again. "I didn't ask him to do it. I don't know." Her mother moved closer and took her daughter's hand in hers. "Neri, look at me." Nerissa obeyed. Her mother's eyes were tired, yet kind. "I've watched you and your sister for a long time," said Lady Roland. "Delphine was always the one who got all the attention. Beautiful, graceful, perfect in every way. But you always remained in the shadows, intelligent and capable, yet invisible." "Mom, let me finish." Her mother squeezed her hand. "When your father lost everything, I placed my hopes in Delphine. I thought her beauty would save us, and I never considered the burden I was placing on you. You took on a role that wasn't yours. You sacrificed your happiness and even your dignity, pretending to be a cook just to help your sister. I did what I had to do." "No," Mother shook her head. "You did what you thought was expected of you, but no one had the right to expect that. No one had the right to ask you to erase yourself for the sake of others." Her mother's words pierced something deep inside Nerissa. Nerissa felt her lips tremble. "Delphine hates me now. I ruined her chance. Delphine is young and hurt." Her mother sighed, "But she will understand in time." "In time." In the meantime, she stood up and walked over to the window while your father accepted the Duke's offer. "We're moving to Hampshire in 2 weeks." Nerissa jumped up from her chair. "What? But it's been decided." Her mother turned to her. "The Duke also conveyed through your father that the invitation to cooking lessons is still valid, Neri. if you wish to come." 3 days later, Nerissa stood in front of the kitchen door of the Duke's mansion, trying to force herself to go in. She didn't know why she had come. She didn't know what she would say to him. The only thing she knew was that she couldn't leave for Hampshire without seeing him one last time. The door opened and Monsieur Laurent appeared. When he saw her, his face broke into a smile. "Mademoiselle Calais, at last. I thought you weren't coming." He pulled her inside. "Today, we are going to learn how to make soufflés. They are a very difficult dish, requiring a light touch and precision." Nerissa allowed herself to be carried away by the familiar rhythm of the kitchen. Monsieur Laurent explained, demonstrated, and corrected her movements. She whipped the egg whites to stiff peaks, carefully folded them into the base, and monitored the oven temperature. Monsieur Laurent was looking into the oven. "It's rising. That's a good sign. You have talent, mademoiselle. Real talent." "Thank you, monsieur. Perhaps one day you'll open your own restaurant, a small establishment in London serving authentic French cuisine." Nerissa tried to smile, but it came out crooked. "I'm afraid that's impossible. We're moving to Hampshire." Monsieur Laurent raised an eyebrow. "Move on," he said. But his lordship said, he paused. He shook his head. "Never mind, it's a pity to lose a good student." At that moment, the Duke came down to the kitchen. Nerissa hadn't seen him for a week, and the sight of him took her breath away. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes, and the sharp lines of his face had become even more pronounced. But when he saw her, there was a flicker of something in his eyes, relief and joy. "Monsieur Laurentio," he said, not taking his eyes off Nerissa, "would you mind leaving us for a few minutes?" The cook looked from one to the other, then nodded wisely. "Of course, Your Grace, I need to check the pantry." He quickly withdrew, closing the door behind him. Silence hung in the kitchen. Nera stood by the table, still holding the whisk, not knowing what to say. The Duke spoke first. "You came?" "Yes, I wasn't sure you would come." "I wasn't sure either." He took a step closer. "Your father accepted my offer." "Yes, we're leaving in 10 days. Something flashed across his face. "I see. You didn't have to do that." The words slipped out before she could stop them. "You offered us a Burston and help with our debts. You don't owe us anything." "I know." "Yes." "Then why?" He came even closer, stopping a step away from her. He ran his hand through his hair. "I couldn't just walk away knowing you were suffering. Even if I can't be with you, I want to know that you and your family are safe." Nerissa felt her heart tighten. "It doesn't change anything between us." "I know," he said, taking her hand, the one that wasn't holding the whisk, and intertwining his fingers with hers. "But at least I'll sleep better knowing I helped." His thumb gently stroked her knuckles. It was such a simple touch, yet it sent a wave of warmth through her body. "My sister still won't talk to me," Nerissa whispered. "She'll come around. Give her time. And if not, then she's more foolish than I thought." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it. "Having a sister like you and turning your back on her out of pride would be foolish." Nerissa wanted to cry and laugh at the same time. "You're only saying that because you're in love with me." The words came out on their own and she immediately regretted them. But the Duke smiled, a slow, warm smile. Yes, he pulled her closer and put his arm around her waist. "I am in love with a woman who pretended to be a cook to save her family. A woman who is teaching herself to cook French dishes from books. A woman with emerald eyes and a brave heart. Talbot." She said his name for the first time without addressing him as Sir. "Yes, Nerissa, it's impossible. We are impossible." "Why? Because my family will work for you. I'll live on your estate in the steward's house. We'll see each other every day. It will be torture or an opportunity." He bowed his head. His forehead touched hers. "It's an opportunity to get to know each other better. It's an opportunity to show your family that I'm serious and that I'm not playing games." "Delphine will find her happiness," he said firmly, "but not with me and not at your expense." Nerissa closed her eyes and breathed in his scent. Sandalwood, soap, something distinctly masculine. "I don't know how this can work. Then let's find out together." He stepped back and looked into her eyes. No promises, no obligations, just a chance. "You're moving to Hampshire. I'm often at my estate there. We'll see each other, talk, and see what happens. It was crazy, risky, and wrong in every way. But when Nerissa looked into his dark eyes, which were full of hope and tenderness, she couldn't say no. "A chance," she whispered. "A chance." He smiled a broad smile that transformed his face and kissed her. Not passionately like last time, but gently and slowly, as if making a promise. When they heard footsteps on the stairs, they quickly pulled away from each other. Nerissa grabbed a whisk, pretending to check the beaten egg whites. The Duke walked over to the window, his hands in his pockets. Monsieur Lun entered and gave them a suspicious look, but said nothing. "The soufflé ready?" he asked. "Almost." Nerissa opened the oven. The soufflé had risen perfectly. It was golden, airy, and trembling. "It's beautiful," she said. "Of course, it's beautiful," said Monsieur Laurent. Monsieur Laurent nodded. "You learned from the best. Now let's try it." He cut the soufflé and divided it between 3 plates. They all tasted it. "Divine!" proclaimed Monsieur Laurent. "Light as a cloud." "You have surpassed yourself, mademoiselle." The Duke remained silent, but his eyes met Nerissa's and revealed his pride. When Nerissa returned home that evening, Delphine was waiting for her in the hall. Her sister looked pale and thin. She, too, had been eating poorly for the past few days. "Tinire," she called softly. "Can we talk?" Nerissa nodded and they went up to Delphina's room. Her sister sat down on the bed. Nerissa settled into a chair by the window. There was a long pause. "I was unfair to you, fine," Delphina began, without looking up. "I accused you of stealing him from me. But the truth is," she took a deep breath, "I never really loved the Duke. I never truly loved him." Neri remained silent, letting her sister speak. "I loved the idea of him," Delphina continued. "The security he could provide, the title, the wealth. But when he looked at me or talked about philosophy and art, I felt small and uninteresting. I felt as if I had to be someone else to match him." "Delph, let me finish." My sister raised her hand, and then I saw how he looks at you, how his face lights up when you walk into a room, how he listens to your every word as if it were the most important thing in the world. Her voice trembled, and I realized that I had never felt that way about him and that he had never felt that way about me. Tears streamed down Delphina's cheeks. "I'm still angry," she admitted. "I'm angry that things didn't go as I planned. I'm angry that I'll have to find another way, but I'm not angry at you. Not really." Nerissa crossed the room, knelt in front of her sister, and took her hands in hers. "I didn't want to hurt you, I swear, I know." Delphina squeezed her hands. "I know you tried to push him away. Mum told me about the letter and how he helps our family." She looked her sister in the eyes. "That's not how a man who's just having fun behaves. He loves you, Neri, truly." "I know," Neri whispered. "And you love him." Pause, then quietly. "Yes," Delphina said, hugging her sister tightly and desperately. "Then don't let him go because of me. Don't sacrifice your happiness because you feel guilty. Promise me." Neri hugged her sister back, feeling the heavy, painful weight in her chest that had been there for weeks finally begin to lift. "I promise." The move to Hampshire took place on a rainy October morning. The steward's house on the Duke's estate was surprisingly spacious. It was a 2-story stone cottage with a garden, kitchen, 4 bedrooms, and a living room with a large fireplace. It was not comparable to Rosemere, of course, but it was much better than they had expected. "It's more like a gentleman's house than a servant's quarters," remarked Father as he looked around the library on the 2nd floor, which was filled with books on agriculture and estate management. "The Duke of Linchester is known for his generosity to his servants," explained Mrs. Hopkins, the housekeeper of the main house who had come to meet them. "His Grace believes that happy workers are the best workers." The main house was a 10-minute walk across the park. Nerissa saw it the next morning when she went for a walk. It was a stately Elizabethan red brick building with turrets and large windows. The gardens around it were well tended. Even in autumn, they were impressive. But the Duke was away. Mrs. Hopkins said he was in London and would be back in a week. A week turned into 2. While she waited, Nerissa helped to settle into the new house, explored the neighborhood, and read books from her father's library. Delphine practiced the piano. There was a piano in the house, a gift from the Duke. Her mother tended the garden, and Nerissa waited. He arrived late on the 3rd evening. As she looked out of her bedroom window, Nerissa saw the lights in the windows of the main house. The next morning, a note arrived. Miss Rowland, it read, I am back. I would be delighted to see you for tea at 3 o'clock today, if you are still interested in our cooking lessons, of course. TD. Nerissa smiled, clutching the letter to her chest. At 3 o'clock, she stood at the door of the main house. She was greeted by the butler, an elderly man with kind eyes. Miss Rowland, he said, his lordship is waiting for you in the small drawing room. Please follow me. He led her through the house, which was less opulent than the London mansion, but cozier. The walls were adorned with wood paneling and portraits of ancestors, and the air was filled with the scent of old books and polished furniture. The small drawing room was bright and overlooked the garden. The Duke was standing by the window, but he turned when she entered. The month in London had clearly done him good. He looked rested, and the mocking smile that she had grown to love was back on his face. Miss Rowland, he said, bowing, how nice to see you again. Your Grace, she replied, please call me Talbot when we are alone. It is improper. Much of what happens between us is improper. He moved closer, but neither of us cared. Like London, boring, empty, and full of people who talk about the weather and politics, but never say anything interesting. He took her hand and brought it to his lips. I missed you. It had only been 3 weeks. 3 weeks and 2 days. He glanced at the mantelpiece clock, which read 6:30. But who's counting? Nerissa laughed. For the first time in weeks, she laughed genuinely. You're impossible. I'm in love. That makes men impossible. He sat her down on the sofa and sat down next to her, closer than was proper, but without touching her. How are you settling in? The house is comfortable. More than that, you are too generous. I can afford to be generous. He hesitated. I want your family to feel welcome here so that you never feel like you have to leave. We're not going anywhere. We don't have another home. All right, they sat in silence for a few minutes, and it was a comfortable silence. Nerissa realized that, for the first time in a long time, she felt calm, as if she had found a place where she could breathe. Tell me something about yourself, Talbot asked. Something I don't know. What do you want to know? Everything, your childhood, your dreams, what you love, what you fear. Everything, Nerissa thought. When I was little, I dreamed of becoming an explorer and traveling the world. I wanted to discover new lands and write books about my adventures. What stopped you? Reality. Girls don't become explorers, they become wives and mothers. Boring. He frowned. You're too interesting to just be someone's wife. What else can I be? He turned to her and cupped her face in his hands. Whatever you want to be. My partner, not my property. You can travel, study, and create. You can live a full life. His thumbs gently stroked her cheeks. I don't want to lock you in a cage, Nerissa. I want to give you wings. His words made her heart beat faster. Well, you sound like a romantic hero from a novel. Maybe you've turned me into one. He kissed her slowly and tenderly, and she felt the last barrier she had built around her heart begin to crumble. When they pulled apart, Talbot smiled. So, what about cooking lessons? My cook, Mrs. Turner, would be delighted to have an assistant. I thought you made that up as an excuse. Partly, he admitted, but I am also serious. You have a real talent, Nerissa. Monsieur Laurent said so, and I've seen it myself. It would be a waste not to develop it. Why should I develop a talent for cooking? And why not? He shrugged. Who says a lady can't be a cook? Who makes those rules? Society. To hell with society. He stood up and held out his hand to her. Come, come, he said. I'll show you the kitchen and introduce you to Mrs. Turner. I think you'll get on well. Nerissa took his hand, allowing him to help her up. You really are impossible. And yet you love me? Unfortunately, yes. He laughed, and the sound filled the room with warmth. As they walked arm in arm through the house to the kitchen, Nerissa thought that perhaps impossible things did sometimes become possible if you found the right person to help you overcome them. The next 3 weeks flew by in a haze of happiness that Nerissa had never hoped to experience. Every morning when the autumn sun broke through the mung, she woke up thinking that she would see Talbot again today. Sometimes they would walk in the park and talk about everything from politics to poetry. Sometimes they would have a cooking lesson in the kitchen with Mrs. Turner, a good-natured woman in her 50s, where Nerissa learned how to bake perfect pies and cook venison stew. Sometimes they would steal moments alone together in the library or the conservatory, where Telbat would kiss her and make the world cease to exist. Today, Nerissa stood in the kitchen of the main house, rolling out dough for an apple pie. Mrs. Turner watched with approval. "That's right, Miss Rowland. Not too thin. The crust should be crispy, but not dry." The cook came closer and checked the thickness of the dough. "Excellent. You definitely have a light touch. Some girls take years to learn what you've mastered in weeks." Nerissa smiled as she placed the dough in the pan. "I have a good teacher." "Yes, but not a diligent student." Mrs. Turner patted her on the shoulder. "His lordship was right to send you to me." She lowered her voice and glanced toward the door. "Between you and me, miss," she continued, "I don't think cooking is the only reason his lordship wants to see you here every day." Her cheeks flushed. "Mrs. Turner." "Oh, don't worry," the cook smiled. "I'm not a gossip, and I've seen the way he looks at you. That's how my late husband used to look at me when we were young." A flicker of nostalgia passed through her eyes. It's the look of a man who has found something precious. Before Nearest could reply, the kitchen door swung open and Telbot entered. He was wearing his work clothes. He wore plain trousers and a shirt with rolled-up sleeves, and his hair was tousled. He looked as if he had just returned from the fields. "Mrs. Turner," he said, "something smells delicious." He sniffed. "Apple pie." "Miss Rowland is cooking, Your Honor. I'm just watching." Telbot approached the table and looked over Nearest's shoulder. "It looks professional. You've outdone yourself." His closeness made Nearest's heart beat faster. She could feel the warmth of his body and smell the earth and fresh air he had brought with him. "The pie still needs to be baked," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What if it fails?" "It won't fail. You have too steady a hand for that." Mrs. Turner cleared her throat loudly. "Your lordship, if you don't mind, I need to go to the cellar to fetch some potatoes for supper. Keep an eye on the pie." "Of course," Telbot nodded, his eyes never leaving Nerissa. When the cook left and closed the door behind her, he wrapped his arms around Talia Nurse's waist and pulled her close from behind. Finally alone, he murmured in her ear. Nearest leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. "We were alone in the library yesterday, 15 minutes before the butler came in with tea." "Not enough. How much is enough? Forever?" He kissed the sensitive spot behind her ear that always made her melt. "But I'd settle for a few hours." Nerissa turned in his arms and put her hands on his chest. She could feel his firm muscles beneath his shirt. "You were in the fields, checking the autumn harvest with your father. He's a good manager, by the way. Enthusiastic and attentive to detail. I'm glad I hired him." "You didn't hire him for his professionalism, though." "No," Telbot admitted honestly, "but I'm glad the decision turned out to be right in every way." He leaned down to kiss her, but Nerissa pulled away. "Wait," she said. "I have flour on my hands." "I don't care," he said, "but your shirt might." "To hell with the shirt." He kissed her deeply and passionately. Nerissa forgot about the flour, the pea, and everything else, except the taste of his lips and the warmth of his hands on her waist. When they pulled apart, they were both breathing heavily. Telbot ran his thumb over her lower lip. "I spoke to my mother last night," he said. "By letter," Nerissa retorted. They had been carefully avoiding the subject of his family for the past few weeks. "And I told her about you." Nerissa's heart sank. "What exactly did you say?" "The truth, that I've met the woman I love and that I'm going to marry her when she agrees." Nerissa took a step back. "Telbot, we haven't discussed marriage, and that's because you avoid the subject every time I bring it up." He crossed his arms over his chest. "But I'm not playing games, Nearest. I'm in love with you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Sooner or later, we'll have to talk about it." "What did your mother say?" He paused, his jaw tensed. "She wants to meet you. She wants to see for herself the woman who has captured her son's heart." "Oh, God." Nerissa leaned against the table. "When she arrives on Thursday, she'll stay for a week." 2 weeks of happiness ended with one sentence. Nerissa felt a chill rise from her stomach to her throat. She hates me, she thought. Even without meeting me, she hates me, the daughter of a ruined viscount, penniless and without a title. Telbot took her by the shoulders, forcing her to look at him. My mother is not a superficial woman. She'll judge you by your character, not your bank balance. It's easy to say that when you have both character and money. He did not smile at her attempt at humor. Nerissa, are you afraid of her? I am afraid of what she might say that would make you realize how unsuitable I am. Nothing and no one can make me realize that. He pulled her closer because that wasn't true. You are perfect for me, but not for your title or your position in society. Then perhaps my position in society needs to be reevaluated. Neri wanted to believe in. She wanted to believe that love was enough. But years of observing how the world works, how titles and money determine destinies, and how women become commodities in the marriage market, had taught her to be realistic. Meeting your mother will change that, she whispered. For better or worse, but it will change things. I know, he said, kissing her forehead. I want you to be ready. Neria spent the next 2 days in a state of quiet panic. Delphina tried to help by going through her sister's wardrobe. Pink. She picked up one of Neria's few decent dresses. No, too girly. Blue. Boring. Oh my God, Neri, you don't have anything suitable to wear to meet the Duke's mother. I know. Neria sat on the bed, hugging her knees. Maybe I should pretend to be sick. Don't be silly. You can't avoid it forever. The door opened and her mother entered, holding a large box. This was sent from the main house, she announced, placing the box on the bed. It's for you, Neri. Nerissa carefully opened the box. Inside, wrapped in thin paper, was a dress. She pulled it out and gasped at its beauty. It was the most beautiful dress she had ever seen. The deep emerald green silk was almost the same color as her eyes. It had a high empire waist and short and lantern sleeves, the latter adorned with delicate silver thread embroidery. The skirt fell in straight folds to the floor. My God, whispered Delphina, running her fingers over the fabric. It's magnificent. There was a note for Nerissa in the box. Wear this tomorrow. Green emphasizes your eyes. My mother values elegance, but dislikes ostentatious luxury. This dress strikes the perfect balance. I look forward to seeing you in it. T. Nerissa pressed the note to her chest. He had thought of everything. He loves you, Saw. Her mother sat down next to her. That's obvious. The question is, will his love be enough to overcome the differences between you? What if his mother decides it isn't? Her mother took Neria's hand. Telbot will have to choose, and we'll find out how deep his feelings are. The Dowager Duchess of Linchester arrived at noon the next day. Neria watched from the window of the steward's house as an elegant carriage pulled up outside the main house. A tall woman in a dark blue traveling dress and a veiled hat stepped out. Even from a distance, she looked impressive. Breathe, whispered Delphine, standing next to her sister. Just breathe. At 3 o'clock, an invitation to tea arrived. Nerissa put on a green dress. It fit her perfectly, as if it had been made especially for her. She allowed Delphina to style her hair into an elegant bun, leaving a few loose curls to frame her face. You look beautiful, announced Delphina, stepping back to admire the result. She won't be able to help falling in love with you. Nerissa wasn't so sure. Telbot met her at the door of the main house. His gaze slid slowly and appraisingly over her, and what she saw in his eyes made her cheeks flush. And you? He fell silent, then shook his head. I have no words. The dress fits. It's perfect, but it's not about the dress. He took her hand and kissed it. My mother is waiting in the living room. She hesitated. She can be blunt and straightforward, but she's also fair. Just be yourself and everything will be fine. The ease with which he said this irritated her. For him, it was just a meeting. For Nerissa, however, it was a test on which her future depended. He led her into a living room flooded with daylight from the tall windows. The widowed duchess was sitting by the fireplace. In person, she was even more imposing. Aged about 60, with silver hair pulled back in a strict bun, and a face that had once been very beautiful. She had sharp cheekbones, a straight nose, and dark brown eyes, just like Telbot's, which seemed to see right through her. Mother, Telbot brought Nears closer. Allow me to introduce Miss Nurse. Roland, this is my mother, Odette, the Dowager Duchess of Linchester. Nerissa curtsied deeply. Your Grace, it is an honor to meet you. The Duchess did not rise. Instead, she studied Nerissa with a long, appraising gaze that made her feel like an exhibit in a museum. Rise, child, and let me see you properly. Neris straightened, lifted her chin, and met the Duchess's gaze. Talbot, leave us, said the Duchess, without taking her eyes off Nurs. Mother, I thought I said leave us. I want to talk to Miss Round alone. Talbot hesitated, looking at Neris. She nodded slightly. He slowly left, closing the door behind him. Silence hung in the room. The Duchess continued to study Neris, then gestured for her to sit down. Tea? Thank you, Your Grace. The Duchess poured tea into two delicate porcelain cups with gold trim and handed one to Nurs. So, Miss Rowland, she began, sipping her tea, my son writes to tell me that he is in love with you, despite the fact that you are the daughter of an impoverished viscount with no entourage or connections. He intends to marry you. Is this true? Nearsa found the directness disconcerting, but decided to respond with equal honesty. As for my background, yes, that is true. As for your son's intentions, you would be better off asking him. The Duchess raised an eyebrow. You do not know his intentions. I know what he says, but words are one thing and actions are another. That's a wise observation for such a young woman. The Duchess set her cup down on the saucer. Tell me, Miss Rowland, do you love my son? Yes. For his title and wealth? No, Nerissa replied, meeting her gaze. Although I won't lie and say that his position is unimportant to my family. We are desperate. My father works as your son's steward because we have no other choice. But I did not fall in love with Talbot for his title. I fell in love with him because of his intelligence and kindness, and the way he sees me, not just another debutante, but the real me. The Duchess listened intently. And what can you offer my son in return? What loyalty and connections can you offer him? Nothing. Nerissa felt her throat tighten. I have nothing but myself. I understand that this is not enough for the Duke. Perhaps for the Duke, but not for Talbot, not for my son, the man, not the title. Nerissa did not know how to respond. The Duchess stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the garden. My late husband was a duke, but when he proposed to me, I was just a baron's daughter. My family was respectable, but not wealthy. My dowry was modest. His mother, my mother-in-law, was furious. She thought he was marrying below his station. She turned to Nerissa. Do you know what he said to her? I'm not marrying a title or a dowry, he said. I'm marrying the woman I love. And he did. They lived together for 40 happy years. Nerissa felt a timid hope spring up in her chest. Your Grace, my mother-in-law never fully forgave me, the Duchess continued. Until the end of her life, she believed that she had made a bad choice in marrying me. But you know what? Her opinion didn't matter because I was happy. I was happy, and that was all that mattered. She returned to her chair and sat down. I am telling you this, Miss Round, so that you understand. I'm not the kind of mother-in-law who judges people based on their bank account or family background. The only thing I care about is whether you will make my son happy. I'll try, whispered Nerissa. Trying isn't enough. The Duchess leaned forward. Being the Duchess's wife isn't easy. Society will judge your every move. They'll whisper about you behind your back. Some doors will be closed to you. Are you ready for that? Nerissa thought about the last few months, pretending to be a cook, breaking the dolphin's heart, all the sacrifices and difficulties she had endured. I have already gone through a lot for your son, Your Grace, and I will go through even more if necessary. The Duchess looked at her for a long time, then suddenly smiled. The first real smile. Good, very good. She stood up. Then I will give you my blessing, but on one condition. What is it? You must promise that you will never let society change you, that you will remain the strong, honest, and courageous woman my son fell in love with. Too many women lose themselves when they become duchesses. Don't become one of them. Nerissa stood up and looked the Duchess in the eyes. I promise. The Duchess held out her hand and Nerissa shook it. Then welcome to the family, dear. Although I suppose my son still has to make a formal proposal. He mentioned it. Talbot can be impulsive. The Duchess smiled. But when it comes to important things, he's actually quite traditional. Expect something romantic. When Nerissa left the drawing room, Talbot was waiting for her in the hall. He jumped up from his chair when he saw her. Well, your mother has given her blessing. Relief and joy were evident on his face. He hugged her, ignoring the butler who was passing by. I knew she would love you, he said. How could she not? She's an amazing woman. Nerissa leaned against his chest and listened to his heartbeat. Now, I understand who you take after. Definitely her. Father was gentler and more diplomatic. Mother always told you the truth to your face. They stood there for a few minutes, just holding each other. Then Telbet stepped back. Come for a walk with me, he said. There's a place I want to show you. He led her through the house. They went out into the garden and continued along the path through the park. The leaves crunched underfoot and the air was cold and clear. The sun was setting, painting the sky pink and gold. They came to a small lake at the far end of the park. The water was as smooth as a mirror and reflected the sky. There was a gazebo by the shore covered in ivy. This is where I used to come as a child, said Telbet. When I wanted to be alone and think, this is my favorite place on the estate. He led her to the gazebo. They sat down on a bench inside. From there, they could see the lake and, in the distance, the main house whose windows were beginning to light up. Beautiful, whispered Nerissa. He was looking not at the lake, but at her. Very beautiful. Then, to her surprise, he knelt down on one knee in front of her. Telbot, Nerissa Rond, he said, taking her hand. I didn't do it right from the start. It all began with deception, pretense, and chaos. But despite all that, or perhaps because of it, I found something real. I found you. His voice trembled, and Nerissa realized he was nervous. The Duke of Lincoln, one of the most influential men in England, was nervous as he proposed to her. You are intelligent, brave, and talented. You make me laugh, you make me think, and you inspire me to be a better person. I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that I am worthy of your love. He took a small velvet box out of his pocket and opened it. Inside was a ring, an emerald surrounded by small diamonds, set in gold. This ring belonged to my grandmother, he said. My mother gave it to me today when I told her I was going to propose to you. She said it should go to a woman who is worthy of wearing it, and I know of no one more worthy than you. Tears streamed down Nerissa's cheeks. So, Miss Nerissa Rond, Telbet looked into her eyes. Will you agree to be my wife? Will you tolerate my eccentricities, my philosophy books, and my overly long discussions about wine? Will you be my partner, my love, my duchess? Nerissa slid off the bench, knelt before him, and cupped his face in her hands. Yes, she whispered, 1,000 times yes. He kissed her first gently, then more deeply and passionately. When they broke apart, he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. I love you, he said, and I love you. They sat in the gazebo, embracing and watching the sun set over the lake. Nerissa thought about how strange everything had turned out. What had begun with despair, pretense, and impossibility had ended, or rather begun anew, with love, hope, and the promise of the future. She was no longer just the younger daughter. She was no longer invisible. She was loved, and that was enough. No, she thought, snuggling closer to Telbet. It was more than enough. It was everything.